To find out more about what Mark Butler's plan would do to small businesses and rural and regional access, I'm joined by the Vice President of the Pharmacy Guild, Mr. Chris Owen. Chris, welcome to the program. What will the impact of this policy change be on the ability of Australians to access healthcare and the advice that pharmacists provide?
Like everything, if something's too good to be true, it usually is. And the devil is always in the detail. So undoubtedly, this will be an impact to the viability of community pharmacies. We know that this is a cut. Now, the question is, to a pharmacist and a pharmacy owner, what do they cut? Do they cut their services to their patients for after hours, whether that be weekends? Do we cut staff? Do we impact jobs? Do those pharmacists who are out there every day, are they giving less to patients because we don't have the financial ability to employ more people? Or do we go to the services that we provide to our patients, such as medication aids? Do we increase the price of those? Or to aged care, which is barely viable as it is? Do we then cut those services, which then forces those people into other areas and more expensive healthcare?
Yeah, that aged care stuff too, I think, is really critical in our community at the moment, particularly with so many people living in home care packages. It's more important than ever. There's been talk about medicine shortages arising as a consequence of this policy change, and it's not obvious to me how that would follow as a consequence of it. Can you explain how it is that medicine shortages might emerge from this change?
Yes, well, we know the medication supply chain is under severe stress at the moment. Any large disruptions to that supply chain can cause catastrophic impacts. We know that the government is saying that there's only 7 medications from this list that are short. That is misinformation. Every pharmacist that I talk to says there's at least 40 from that list that are in short supply or are going to be short. So we know that pharmacists are dealing with this every day, and those colleagues of mine who are trying desperately to source medication, especially for those very chronic illnesses, they're going to find it more difficult if this policy is introduced in a hasty fashion.
Because there's so many big brands that operate in the pharmacy space, a lot of people forget that community pharmacy is largely a small business endeavour, that the pharmacist behind the counter is very often the person who owns a business. But small business is a really difficult climate to work in any industry. And now you've got this additional challenge potentially laid upon your industry. What's that going to mean for the future viability of community pharmacy, particularly in rural and regional areas?
Well, I have a regional and rural pharmacy myself, and I know that my rent is going up every year. My wages are going up every year. My electricity bills are going up every year. And to be able to cut that level out of our profits is going to cause catastrophic impacts. We know that we're going to have a problem being able to source our customers if this is introduced in a very hasty fashion, of which it's proposed to be. We asked of the government is that they make a guarantee that not only will no patients be worse off, but no community pharmacy will be worse off as well.
Have they provided that guarantee?
Not yet.
Well, I hope they do, because particularly in those rural and regional areas, and the more remote you get, the more critical this becomes. The dependency on pharmacists is really high, particularly when it can take a long time to get into a GP or other medical service. It really is the pharmacist that is the lifeline that tides people over until they can get proper care. Which is not to suggest the pharmacists aren't giving proper care in the first place, but until they can get that extra appointment, it is the pharmacists that are left holding the bag. And the idea that pharmacists might be less viable in those rural and regional communities is something that really should send a shudder down the spine, particularly of the people who are living in those places. Tell me, what should be the approach taken by government here? There needs to be a balancing of the viability of pharmacies, the quality of care provided to consumers. There needs to be sustainability for taxpayers, and there needs to be a degree of convenience. Where do we get that balance right?
Well, the Pharmacy Guild advocated at the last election to have an affordable medicines now policy. Now that involved reducing the co-payment down to the current level of $30 for a general patient. We can take that one step further. We know that we can go to $19, and the current policy will actually only help 1 in 5 Australians. Whereas if we can reduce the co-payment, every Australian is benefiting from that policy.
Well, hopefully there will be a change of tack that involves listening to what good work you and the people you represent are doing every day in our communities. Chris, Owen, thank you so much for your time on tonight's program. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amanda.